it is my absolute honor to welcome to the stage, all the way from Australia, Olivia Wright, enchanting us with her speech, The Myth of Meritocracy.
Best of luck.
Within my family, the simple board game of Monopoly isn't just a game, no. It's a contact sport. Bragging rights, bruised egos, it's a rite of passage, if you will. And just a couple weeks ago, I found my cousins proudly perched on Mayfair and Park Lane, the most coveted squares on the board. Yet here I was, $20 to my name, stuck in jail, desperately trying to mortgage Old Kent Road, the square that nobody wants. But, ladies and gentlemen, here was the kicker. Are you ready for it? They didn't just build this empire alone. They had their uncle as their campaign manager, trading, advising, slipping fake banknotes under the table like it was the stock exchange. And when I finally, inevitably admitted defeat, they looked me dead in the eye and said, "Oh, you just didn't work hard enough." Wallowing in my loss, I looked longingly over at the kitchen candle that had been slowly burning throughout the match. And I thought to myself, it seemed as though my cousins had been handed a candle already lit, whereas I was trapped in the dark, still desperately trying to find even just a match. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the image of meritocracy is this perfectly polished concept that success is earned. That if you work hard, hustle harder, and want it more, then society will reward you. But the light of a candle is only transferred to another candle when it's close enough to reach. And that proximity to wealth, to power, to networks isn't evenly shared. It never has been. Take, for example, everyone's favorite tycoon, Elon Musk. If I had $1 for every time I've heard him called a self-made genius, I'd probably have enough money to afford a Tesla. Or maybe a Tesla wheel at best. But what we conveniently overlook is that Elon had these elite pipelines, a family emerald mine that paved his way, that illuminated his path long before even any of us had a shot at glory. And so the question then becomes not if we believe in merit, it's if we're honest about who was handed a match like Elon and who was left to generate their own heat from scratch. You see, I'm currently studying law at university, which means that I spend a lot of my time analysing the legislation that shapes these rules, these resources, these opportunities within our society. Yet, as an Indigenous Australian, my involvement and meaning of law and my people's relationship to it has been a little bit more complicated. I present to you the idea of terra nullius, Latin translation, no man's land. A legal doctrine throughout history that meant that my Indigenous people's land was land belonging to nobody. That in the eyes of the law, we were simply invisible. And it made me think this isn't just about history. No, this was a game of Monopoly that my ancestors had no say in playing. But they weren't handed Mayfair, Park Lane, or even Old Kent Road. They didn't even have a square on the board to begin with. But this extends long after this historical exclusion. Our current systems, our universities, our professions, the institutions we're asked to succeed within are rarely designed for us. And instead, they actively seek to exclude us. It's no wonder then that Indigenous Australians are half as likely to complete a university degree than their not Indigenous counterparts. But that's not a personal failure. That's a structural one. Harvard philosopher Michael Sandel, within his work, The Tyranny of Merit, supports this. He says that this current meritocratic system distorts our sense of moral worth. He says it creates what he likes to call hubristic winners and shamed losers. And in doing so, we made inequality a character flaw and privilege invisible. Now, I'll admit, some may argue that a meritocratic system does work. They argue that this more need-based support is actually just punishing success or lowering the standard. But to that, I'd pose to them an anecdote, a simple one. If two runners start a race at two different spots, by giving that person behind a head start, that isn't rigging the game, that's leveling the playing field. So, what do? How do we fix a rigged game of Monopoly instead of my usual tactic of flipping the board, storming off, and not talking to my cousins until Christmas time? I think it starts with a question. Not a policy one. Of course, we need more need-based scholarships, paid internships, but asking ourselves, who lit our own candle? Was it a parent who may have known the right people? Was it a teacher who might have had the right connections? Because even though I might not play Monopoly with my cousins ever again, if we want a true meritocracy, we need to stop confusing inherited light with earned flame. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, that was incredible. I know just sitting there, I felt riled up, but inspired all at the same time. And so I really hope that our audience did as well. And if you did, do you have any questions? We will make our way to you this very moment. Don't be shy, guys. Just one simple hand in the air, and our microphones will make their way to you. Up. Over there. Perfect. Please do wait for the microphone to get to you before asking your question. It's okay. Quite the trek.
Is this on? Okay.
I feel a bit sorry for Old Kent Road. How do we light his or her flame?
That is a very great question indeed, and I think it's one that we're all wondering, how do we light our own flame? It's a metaphorical one, but it's a pretty simple one to ask. I think first and foremost, it starts by reevaluating our own values and where we sit within society. Are we facing disadvantage? And 99% of the time, we're not the only one experiencing that. And I think as a step forward to light our own flame, we don't need these big grand gestures, but it starts with small actions. The first example that comes to mind, I am proudly a Cambridge scholar. So at my university, I am one of 20 Indigenous Australians who were supported on their journey to university. And this Cambridge Foundation wasn't founded by these big corporate, conglomerates. They were supported by families. Even families that didn't have to donate millions of dollars, but simply showing up to events, learning the fellow scholars, their stories, how they got here and their journey. And I think by doing that, we light our own flame by supporting the causes we're passionate about. And not only does that make us feel more confident in ourselves, that also boosts up everyone that we're supporting, including, myself included. So I think it definitely starts with the small actions. You don't need to be donating millions to charities or spending heaps of money, but I think just doing things that align with your own values, and I think in doing that we support ourselves and support those around us. So, yeah, hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Any more questions? There we go, right up there at the top, please.
Earlier, you have spoken about Elon Musk, a certainly lucky individual to have been born in such richness. Would you agree that certain individuals are simply just born unlucky and will never be able to succeed in life?
That's a very interesting question. It's a very, very deep one indeed. No, definitely not. I think there's definitely a mentality, especially with the pressures that we face in society, that we feel that we're the burden, that these, inequalities placed upon us are our fault and our fault alone, and it's just dumb luck or bad luck. I think we definitely are all born. We're all born human. We're all born without hatred or any inequalities thrust upon us. I think that it's the society and the environment that we're surrounded by that either deems us lucky or unlucky in, layman's terms. But I think it's a matter of what we do to get ourselves out of those situations. Like I said before, it's a matter of reaffirming your own values and supporting those around us to boost one another up. That maybe, maybe we seem unlucky in the beginning, but our luck may change if we do those small little actions. So yeah, I don't think anyone's born necessarily unlucky per se. But yeah, thank you.
And we'll take one more question from the gentleman over there, please. Sorry. Quite the walk. I mean, the stairs are absolutely beautiful, but when you have to carry a microphone around, they can be quite tricky to navigate.
Should I hand it to him? There you go.
Thank you so much for your brilliant presentation, and I must acknowledge in my own view that this is extremely difficult to do, so very, very well done. I was just looking at the definition for meritocracy, and it says, a social system, and this is from the Cambridge Dictionary, a social system, society, organization, in which people get success or power because of their abilities, not because of their money or social position. And my question is, what would be the alternative to meritocracy, in your view, in identifying talent and rewarding it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very excellent question, and I think that, give me a minute to pose it, it's a very hefty question. I think that a lot of our societies currently is, even if they don't deem themselves as necessarily meritocratic, I think inherently they might be deep down. And I think the alternative to that would be really just focusing on someone's work and the effort that they put in. I think that's first and foremost the top priority. I think that a lot of the time we tend to glamorize and focus on the end result, where they got and their achievements at the end, the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. I think a system that actually rewards the work and the grit and the effort that was put in to get to that point would be a much better alternative. And I think shifting our priorities, I guess, as a society to what goes on behind the scenes would be a much better alternative to the end result and that sort of priority that's placed on that we currently have now. So, thank you.
A big round of applause for Olivia.